Good morning, everybody. It's Tuesday. I got my cup of coffee. I'm going to try and produce another chronicle. This one's going to take a different tack than my normal storytelling has been because it involves something fairly personal. Before I do that, I want to come back to a commitment I've made, which is not to waste your time. So I want to talk about what you can expect if you continue to the end of this video. And I've got a little tidbit at the end that you might want to stick around for, because I'll bet it's a piece of information that you're not aware of. And I think it's one that deserves some attention. So having said that, let's go back to what this video is about. I'm going to talk about a disease that I have right now, and that is I'm a prediabetic. Like a lot of Americans, I have trouble with insulin resistance. And I'm not going to make this a video about all the different facts and figures and definition of terminology. But if you're a senior or now even a young adult and you're in a range that your doctor tells you from your A1C data that you're a pre-diabetic, you need to be concerned. And this video is about that. But if you're above 60, it's particularly important for you and your partners and your caretakers to do everything they can to help you maintain glucose or blood glucose control. Now, I'm not a doctor, but I'm a scientist, and there will be a disclaimer in the summary of this video below alerting you to that fact, and also a mention of the fact that because I'm a scientist, I'm very biased toward the quality of experimental data that tries to establish cause. And most of the studies that I come across, especially from companies who have a vested interest in their recommendations, are based on correlation studies, which don't have anything to do with a cause. They merely show correlation. And I think they're misleading and can lead us down a terrible path. One of those that's common and that I think most of you will either be shocked that I say this or question the validity of the statement, and that is that it's important to consume fat. Fat-free diets for someone who's in an insulin-resistant situation are not good. And that's pretty much, I would say, the quality of the work supporting that notion is much higher than the correlative studies which suggest the opposite. And there are doctors, I'll refer to a couple of them in my summary notes so you'll know that. So now let's take a pause. What did all that mean? This is going to be a podcast. It's going to talk about a health condition I have. It's going to outline what I'm doing right now because there's some new technology that's just come about, and I've adopted it and I'm finding it very helpful in a struggle that's been sort of one that I groped with because I had no way of measuring anything, no way of understanding where I was in the spectrum of things all along. So that's what we're going to talk about, and I hope you find this interesting. Okay, let's get started with the meat and potatoes here. I've talked about being over 60, and especially if you get into the next decade, like I am. I'm 77 right now, and thankful to be alive and kicking at 77. But, every morning is like a morning when I walk my dog to the different parks in my neighborhood. And usually there's a gateway, which I call the gauntlet. And if you're a dog owner and you're on your walk with your dog and you're looking down that path, you always want to know if there's another dog coming the other way and what kind of dog, etc. Because if you don't, it could lead to a moment of concern. Let's put it that way. Okay, so by analogy, all geezers like me are in that gauntlet. You don't know what's going to happen day to day. Health is an issue that concerns everyone, and it concerns everyone all their life. Once they lose aspects of their health, they become much more aware of the critical nature of health to their well-being in general. So, because, it's a phone call away from having a diagnosis of this or that or the other thing, and you just never know what's going to happen. So the gauntlet analogy seems kind of appropriate. You don't know where you're going to get whacked from one minute to the next, right? Well, sometimes you have a way of mitigating a health circumstance that you're aware of, perhaps because of recent doctor visits or communications with your physician. And that is the thing that's called your A1C level, that is normal, that is kind of a normal test that can be asked for sometimes as you go through, and it measures all kinds of things, including your cholesterol levels and all your other healthy numbers, your HD cholesterol in relation to your low density cholesterol, etc. Blood sugar is one of those things. Triglycerides is another. And then there's a calculation that is made from the blood sample that you submit at the time of testing, which calculates, it's a calculation, by the way, of that A1C level. Now, if you current correlative studies suggest that if your A1C level is above 6, you're starting to enter into a pre-diabetic zone. And if it's above, I think, 6.5, you're officially classified as a type 2 diabetic. Now, diabetes is a very complicated disease, but it's related to metabolism. And in particular, it's related in your body's ability to manage glucose in your bloodstream. And I never fail to be fascinated by the amazing self-regulatory processes that are built into our body. We tend to operate, our body tends to adjust automatically without us knowing about any of it consciously. It's part of the evolution process that got us to where we are as a species. And we don't, for example, get out of a certain range in body temperature or bad things start to happen, etc. Well, glucose is one of those. And in glucose, you don't want your blood sugar to get too high, and you don't want your blood sugar to get too low. Well, your body has adapted to that phenomena because it tries to control that level of glucose in your bloodstream within a certain range. Now, that control mechanism, however, can break down, and it can break down for a number of reasons. Sometimes it's genetic, like my father suffered from late onset diabetes too. And I believe my grandmother also had diabetes and was diabetes too, and was on insulin before she passed away. So it's in the family. And that's one component that contributes to your tendency for how your pancreas will produce the hormone insulin to be able to interact with the glucose and remove it selectively from your bloodstream and give it access into every living cell in your body, because glucose is a form of fuel that every cell needs to stay alive. And so when this all gets out of adjustment, something unusual happens, and it can take decades. And so you can be trucking along, doing your thing, and 10 to 20 years later, all of a sudden somebody tells you that you're insulin resistant and that you're pre-diabetic. That's kind of what happened to me, and it's been going on now for maybe 10 years. I've been in this zone of pre-diabetes for a long time, and there was a silver lining in that. And the silver lining for me personally was I witnessed my father and his quality of life in trying to manage diabetes long term. And I made a choice. I made a choice to try to do something about it. So I began leaning toward Mediterranean type diets, eliminating junk food from my diet, and doing regular exercise. And those things have helped me stay within that range. I actually went down a bit, and I'm into the high fives some of the time. My last test was kind of back up to 6, but I'm still on the cusp, right? So I know one thing is true. If you talk to your doctor about this condition, the doctor, he or she, has difficulty talking about it with any sort of specificity. And the reason for that is they don't really have any data. They don't really know anything except general guidelines, and they can send you off to get counseling for prediabetes and diabetic control, but they really don't know anything about you and on the level of your blood glucose and how variable it is, and once you get a peak, how long it takes the blood glucose to come back to normal. And they don't really know anything but a blood sample test that calculates A1C maybe once a year. And so I find that very inadequate. And I think it's our personal responsibility to do better than that with our doctors and provide the doctors with more insight into our own metabolism around blood glucose control. So I'm a kind of a technology nut, as some of you probably know who have followed me. But recently I became aware of a blood glucose continuous monitor that was available and sold over the counter. And the monitor was also FDA approved for being able to sell over the counter. Now, I'm not here to promote the monitor. I will put the name of that company, the one I use. See, this is it right here. See this patch? That's the monitor. And I'm having trouble getting my finger lined up with the camera, but that's just me. But that patch, underneath that patch is the continuous glucose monitor, and that's a misnomer because it's not really that. It's a biosensor, and there's a difference. And it's the biosensor development that is just became commercially available. The continuous glucose monitor evolved for diabetics, and it's the same sort of thing, but it essentially samples blood directly, and the biosensor only senses the fluid underneath the skin, and it lags a little bit in what the glucose value is, but I believe the last I read it was 94 to 95% accurate in its ability. So, and that monitor is really simple to use. I mean, I can do everything with this. I can swim, I can run, I can do anything except maybe apply direct pressure, and it won't give me readings if I'm more than, say, 20 feet away from my phone, which is the other neat thing. All you do is when you purchase one of these is you also have an application which is available on any of your smartphones. And that application continuously Bluetooth connects with the monitor. And when it does that, it provides you with a reading like every 5 or 6 minutes or whatever the sequence is. And that allows you to track your history through the day. And it also provides statistical information like how variable your blood glucose is. And because it's monitoring actual blood glucose levels over a long span of time, it can compute your A1C value. And once you've accumulated enough data, and I'm not quite there yet, I can get the variability or the standard deviation, it's called, around my blood glucose level. But and that's important. But I can't yet. I will receive in probably another 30 days. I'll have enough data accumulated to allow that piece of information to become available to me, and with a very easy access. Now, there's also information out there on both the monitor that I use, the applications. You can find a lot of instructive information by going to the company that sells the monitors. So that's not what I'm going to talk about. What I'm going to talk about is why the hell am I doing this? And one reason I alluded to, I wanted to be able to give my doctor, when I sat down with that 20 to 40 minute visit every so often and went over my medications and so forth and so on, I could have a meaningful discussion about what I'm seeing and what I'm doing, because I'm damn well determined not to die with diabetes 2. I want to keep below that line. I don't want to have to adopt a lifestyle that makes me cope with insulin. Now, I'm not saying that for any other reasons. There are people out there that don't have choices. They're diabetic they have diabetes 1. Their pancreas can't produce insulin. There are people out there that, through no fault of their own, became a diabetic 2, and their insulin resistance is now learned to be high enough that they can't exist without supplements of insulin. And so what I do here is not meant to be a factor in judging those people. This is a lifestyle choice I'm trying to make for myself. And if there are a number of you out there like me, that's why I decided to share this journey about what I'm learning and so forth. And so let's get to the chase here. What have I learned? I've learned quite a bit of things. One is that this insulin resistance thing affects a third of our population, approximately, depending on whose study you believe. It's becoming more serious, and it also is showing up at a much younger age, the insulin resistance. And there's a reason for that, and it's primarily related to diet. So one reason I'm doing this is I hope my grandkids are listening, because their dietary habits and the things that they're exposed to in the way of food early on can set a pattern in their life which is really destructive. And it's leading to a crisis in obesity, and because of all the adoption of all the social media time, the video gaming, the stuff that diminishes physical exercise and healthful activity levels, which help regulate your blood sugar level, and the spikes that you take, those things are not good. And so one aspect of why I'm sharing this is for the benefit of those people who are listening. And whether they listen to an old guy like me, I have no idea. But I'm doing it because of the reason I stated. And because now I have a tool to help me, to motivate me. I've learned how my particular body reacts to the food I take on a 24/7 basis. I can see after a meal how my levels rise based on the foods I eat. I can now tell there's a tremendous difference in the order, if a tremendous difference in the excursions that my blood glucose takes based on the order of the food. If I eat proteins and healthy fats and then consume leafy greens and other forms of good carbohydrate, my blood sugar level stays within a reasonable range, within the limits that are typically experienced by someone on the verge of type 2 diabetes like me. So that's important. I get knowledge, and I can share that knowledge. I've also learned the importance of, after my last meal of the day, of taking exercise. So now my wife and I go out after dinner, and it only 15 minutes. It only takes about 15 minutes. And when the peak starts to rise and my blood sugar goes up after I've consumed food and the digestion process takes place, I see it go up. And then when I take that walk, it starts to level off and it comes down, and influences the time that my blood sugar is out of its normal average range. And that's an important thing for your overall health. So I've learned those things, and I think it's very important. The other thing I've learned is that part of this fight is because as you grow older, you have no control over the fact that your body factory starts to fail, and your insulin is no longer as effective as it once used to be. And that happens with age. So there's an age component to this as well as a genetic component. And one of the reasons that I've learned that I want to manage this blood glucose level more accurately is because it affects your mood. It affects your energy level. It affects how you react to things emotionally, how much I love to be in the creative zone a lot. Well, if I'm tired and feeling like a slug, that's kind of hard to do. But if I discipline myself a little bit, I can do better. And I feel better. And I react to things on a much better level. So, I've learned this, that high blood sugar leads to high insulin in your body, and there's nothing you can do about it. High insulin leads to insulin resistance, and insulin resistance leads to even higher blood sugar levels, and it's a vicious cycle. And once you get out of that cycle, if that's age-related or genetic, it's very, very hard to escape. So you need to do things. You need to eliminate certain things from your diet. I think I had something here on my notes screen that was kind of a summary of that. And I'm going to scroll here. It doesn't matter if I find it or not, but I've done essentially the following. I've eliminated sugar almost completely from my diet. Oddly enough, though, I know I can consume dark chocolate. And that's a treat. And certain kind of berries I can have with my dark chocolate. And I can also, can't have ice cream, but I can have unsweetened Greek yogurt, which I've acquired a taste for, especially as a kind of dessert. So I can eliminate the sugars. I can eliminate the carbohydrate. I can't eliminate it, but I can reduce the carbohydrate, the things like grains and potatoes and corn. And I can use non-starchy vegetables and leafy greens instead. And I've also learned that if I eat fewer meals, maybe in the morning and before 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock at night, it helps a lot in maintaining a low variability around my average glucose, if that makes sense to you. So, what I see is I've got a measurement. I've got feedback. I can check an action I can take. I can go on an excursion. Like, for example, what happens if I take a drink? Well, if it's beer, it's not so good. But if it's an alcohol that's straight alcohol, not full of other sugar-containing ingredients, hardly anything happens. I don't even notice it. So my Friday night martini nights with my wife, hey, they go on as normal. So there's some wins here, right? But if I eat things like bread, which I loved, not so good. But if I eat a little protein and I try to select a bread type that's healthy, I can eat a little bit of that, and it doesn't seem to hamper it. And it greatly reduces the time that I peak over my top glucose level. So, I don't want to bore you with a lot of, I did this and this happened. But my story is about this journey that's now gone on for almost a decade of struggling against this phenomena that I have virtually little biological control over. I can only try to design the way I take fuel into my body and the type of fuel that I provide it. And I've learned another thing, the importance of protein and fat. I mean, it seems logical now that I've gone through all the data in this study I mean, we're animals and we're carnivores. And, hey, this whole thing I'm really suspect of about rice and grains and all this other kind of stuff that has been promoted by companies who have a vested interest in the scientific studies or correlation studies they do and overall health. And I think my circle is whole foods. It's a big circle. If it's whole food and real food, then it's only a matter of what type of whole foods. Anything that's outside that circle that's processed, like grains and wheat flour and all this other kind of stuff, is outside that circle, and it's not something I can cope with. Yeah, sometimes I wish I would. I mean, I love one of those Dorito chips or whatever every once in a while, but it's not worth the sacrifice. I don't want to wind up crossing that line. But that's my choice, and I'm not trying to preach otherwise. But now I'll leave you with another one. I said at the beginning I was going to tell you about something which I found out most recently. And I'm a writer, and I've dabbled in the arts. I'm a painter, and I'm a scientist. And all three of those things integrated together, and I did some storytelling. And my first book was about a disease called Alzheimer's disease. So I became really passionate about that, and I participated in a number of public forums about the value of storytelling as a way of communicating the horrendous nature. In fact, I think Alzheimer's is one of the most horrific diseases known to mankind. It's a horrible way to die, and it has a huge impact on our society and the people we love. Well, I'm not going to go down that trail because that could be the subject of another video. But what I do know now is that recent science has suggested, now there's an active hypothesis being worked on, that the level of insulin, or the level of the wrong kind of insulin, the insulin-resistant forms that are in your brain, inside your brain, inside the tissues of your brain, those insulin levels are causing inflammation in the brain itself. And it's now being understood that that inflammation could be a leading factor in insulin resistance, and insulin sensitivity in the brain could be a leading factor to the onset of Alzheimer's disease. And previous correlation studies have suggested that the various forms of plaque and aldehydes in your brain that show up in the scans are the cause of Alzheimer's. And there's been billions of dollars spent in research around Alzheimer's, but nobody really has come up with an effective treatment for it. And a lot of times it can truly only be diagnosed after you're dead. But the impact of having the disease is horrific. And this hypothesis that I just referred to, the association of insulin resistance with the inflammation in the brain, and that with the onset of neurological dysfunctions caused by that inflammation, is now being actively researched. And the initial data is proving that it's more than a reasonable chance that this will be a key mechanism. So much so that a new term has been coined that I was not familiar with. and that is Alzheimer's disease being referred to as diabetes 3. So I'll leave you with that note, and I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and if you did, you can leave some comments. And as I get more proficient, I'll give you sources of posts that I'm going to make in various outlets so that you can get more information if it was helpful. But so long for now, and I hope you have a great day. And as always, make a little hope. We can all use it. Every day is special, and it's your turn to make some hope and share it with somebody else. Thanks a bunch.